What's up, everyone? This is Lucas Ross Sports, and you're watching our Lucas Ross Sports channel. It's time to continue my AP Top 25 poll update after week number 5 and heading into week number 6. Basically, this is not my own Top 25. This is basically the regular Top 25, and I'll give you my perspective thoughts on it and what I think about all these teams that are heading into the Top 25. And there's been a lot of changes. There's been a lot of changes to the Top 25 this weekend. Of course, some new teams joined the Top 25. Some teams been out of it. So, we're going to see what the Top 25 looks like after week number 5 and heading into week number 6. So let's get right into it here with the AP Top 25 poll update. We start from 21 through 25. LSU joins the Top 25 for the first time this season. They're 4-1, coming off a big win against a good opponent in Auburn. LSU pretty much controlled that game on the defensive side of the ball. We know Auburn hasn't been that good for, this season after losing to Penn State at home, and I think Auburn's pretty much fallen apart for the rest of the season. But I like what LSU's doing. They're really impressing me. I wasn't really high on this team going into this year, and I think they're doing really good so far. And LSU, they play Tennessee this weekend. That's going to be an interesting matchup, interesting battle between two unbeatens. So we're about to see there. Tennessee's coming out of a bye week, so, it's going to be really interesting of a game. Cincinnati back in the top 25 after, losing to Arkansas in that first game of the year. They're back in it. So, Cincinnati, I can still see them being a playoff contender. Maybe perhaps the only American Atlantic team that can really get in there. Instead of BYU, they're one of those group of 5 teams that can perhaps make it into the college football playoff at the end of the year. And once we're now in the month of October, we're starting to see how these teams play. We're starting to see these teams get a lot better as the season goes on. Mississippi State at number 23. They joined the top 25 for the first time this year. I'm really liking what Mississippi State's offense is doing. An explosive offense, a game for them against Texas A&M this past Saturday. What a game that was. Mississippi State blew them out. Not blew them out, but just basically scored after score in that game. So, it was really interesting how Mississippi State's offense looked really good in that game. And you could tell Will Rogers is getting better as a quarterback. We haven't really seen, him being consistent at times, but this time of the year he's being really consistent. Syracuse, undefeated at 5-0. They're number 22, and Syracuse is a top 25 team. I knew going into this season, I was doubting them a little bit, but Syracuse, their season has been so good so far, and I think the Atlantic Division is wide open. I think Clemson pretty much is the only team to beat. If Syracuse can beat Clemson, they probably will clinch the Atlantic Division, but they still have a ton of games to go, and it's going to be still a long season. Washington, moving down to number 21 after that loss to UCLA. UCLA is a top 25 team as well, but I'm here to talk about Washington. That game got to them. I knew it was going to be an upset alert type game. I didn't have any in my upset alert video, but I knew it was going to be a big-time upset happening, and UCLA pulled it off at home. Washington losing this game on the road at UCLA. So Washington is 4-1 on the year, and that's 25 through 21. Let's go to the next column, 16 through 20. Kansas State at number 20. They moved up to 5 spots after being at number 25 last week. And they're coming off a big-time win against Texas Tech. I thought that game would have been probably an upset alert type game. But I think, Kansas State with home field advantage, they would walk away with that win. And they did. So Kansas State at number 20. And now Kansas. Kansas is in the top 25 for the first time in a long time. When was the last time the Jayhawks were in the top 25? It's been a long time ago. Kansas is finally there. And the Big 12 Conference, they have a lot of ranked teams this year. The ranked teams have been so crazy. The season has just been so crazy so far. And Kansas is 5-0. Really impressed with what the Jayhawks have done so far this year. And also UCLA at number 18. They are also 5-0. These teams are, just surprising me. UCLA, I knew they wouldn't be a surprise because I was pretty high on them. And I think this is interesting. Kansas and UCLA are pretty much two teams that people were, getting doubted by. UCLA had the easiest schedule, though, coming into this year. And Kansas, everybody just doubted Kansas a lot, and I included them as well. But I'm really impressed with what Kansas has done. TCU at number 17. I was pretty high on TCU coming into this year. They're 4-0 now. coming off that bye week, and then also blowing out Oklahoma. How did TCU do that? I mean, that was crazy. TCU blowing out Oklahoma at home. And I told y'all, TCU is a team that you don't want to sleep on. You know, they had a lot of production coming back this year, and they had a veteran experience type team, and TCU winded up being, you know, the better team against Oklahoma. BYU at number 16, I've been kind of quiet on BYU these last few weeks. You know, BYU, they're 4-1. I mean, they're losing that game to Oregon. I mean, after that game against Oregon, I came quiet on them, but I think they're starting to look better as a team. You know, they still have a ton of tough games, though, to go on the schedule, including Arkansas, which played pretty well against Alabama, but they're out of the top 25 picture. But BYU, I think they're getting better as a team. Let's go to the next column now, and that's 11 through 15. Wake Forest at number 15. They're coming off that big road win against Florida State. They're 4-1. And I think this was a big win for Wake Forest. You know, they have a chance to still get redemption on Clemson, but, you know, they don't have to play them anymore in the regular season, but they could still win the Atlantic Division. The Atlantic Division is still wide open. You know, Clemson might be the best team, but any of these teams can win it, including NC State that lost to Clemson as well. Both NC State and Wake Forest have lost to Clemson this year, but they could still win it. And I think, you know, NC State, they have the best shot as well as Wake Forest. And, you know, Wake Forest has a veteran quarterback in Sam Hardman. They can still win all the rest of their games and perhaps make a spot in the college football playoff. And I was pretty high on NC State coming into this year. You know, I knew that loss would come to Clemson. And Wake Forest, I knew their loss would come to Clemson as well. But I had them more losses on the year. All right, next one, Kentucky at number 13, 4-1. They're coming off that 3-point loss to Ole Miss. I mean, I got to tell you, Kentucky played pretty well in this game, but they could not score anything on the Ole Miss defense. The defense was pretty tough. You know, Kentucky, you know, couldn't move the football. Will Levis kind of struggled as well. I mean, I think, you know, you got to give Ole Miss's defense credit. They had their A game in this one. And like I said, when you bring your A game, you're going to win the game pretty easily. But Kentucky, they have done a pretty nice job so far. I'm still impressed with them. They didn't move down a lot of spots. You know, they didn't really moved down a lot of spots, like 6 spots or something like that. So Kentucky's still in the top 15. Oregon at number 12. Oregon's been kind of dangerous in the last few weeks, you know. After beating BYU and coming off, you know, that brutal loss to Georgia in the early year, they've gotten better as a team. You know, 4-1 now. I mean, it's not about the record. It's just about the offense. Bo Nix is getting better. You can see it as well in his eyes. You know, Bo Nix is getting better. I mean, Oregon still has a chance to win the Pac-12. You know, they can still go to the Pac-12 championship even though there's no divisions anymore. So they got a chance. You know, Oregon's getting better. Utah, speaking of them, another Pac-12 team. I'm still not giving my team this hopes up for the college football playoff berth. Utah is getting better as a team. They've been scoring now a lot of points ever since that loss to Florida. I mean, both of these teams, you know, Utah and Oregon, they both got beaten by SEC teams to begin the year, and Oregon got blown out the most, but both of these teams are getting better. You know, we've seen them in the last few weeks now. They have gotten better on offense and the defense especially, so we're seeing both of these teams get better. Let's go now from 6 through 10, and that's Penn State. Penn State at number 10. How about them? They're 5-0. I mean, you know, they're pretty much the only team, maybe Michigan as well, to beat Ohio State this year. And that's probably the ultimate key. I mean, Ohio State probably is the team to beat in the, you know, Big Ten this season because Minnesota lost. You know, they're out of the top 25 now. I mean, anybody can, you know, nobody else can beat Ohio State except for Penn State and, you know, probably Michigan because, I mean, Michigan State is not good either. I mean, it's pretty tough. You know, Ohio State has a great offense. And you got to wonder which team will beat Ohio State in the season. But I really don't see anybody beating Ohio State this season. But Penn State, they're 5-0, looking pretty good. Sean Clifford looks good as a quarterback, and they got a really good week ahead of them. So, I mean, they're looking really good. Ole Miss, I just talked about them. I mean, they're 5-0, beating Kentucky at home. They didn't score a lot of points in this game. The offense kind of looked a little bit sluggish, but I think the defense won them this game. And that's been the better part about this Ole Miss team this year. They've been better on defense than last year. You know, the first 2 seasons of Lane Kiffin's year, I mean, they haven't looked really good on defense. This year, they look really solid on defense. So I think Ole Miss has a chance to still be maybe a top 5 team. They still have to play Alabama, which they get them at home. So, I mean, that's a big key there for them. Tennessee at number 8, they're 4-0. They had a bye week, so not really much to talk about Tennessee, other than they do play LSU this weekend. Oklahoma State, they're coming off that win against Baylor at home, or actually on the road. Oklahoma State with a big-time win there after a bye week, so I think that bye week really helped them out. I think Oklahoma State is pretty much a playoff contender. You know, they're pretty much the team to beat now in the Big 12, perhaps. I mean, you know, you can look at all these other teams in the Big 12. Oklahoma is not the best team in the Big 12. Texas, it is not the best team either. So you can talk about Oklahoma State and, you know, probably, you know, Kansas and TCU. Those teams can still win it. You know, they still have to play them on the schedule, but it's going to be a wide-open Big 12 season. USC at number 6, they're coming off a big-time win after that sluggish game against Oregon State, but they really played pretty well this time against their opponent this weekend. They are 5-0 now, so, I mean, USC, I think, is still a playoff contender. The Pac-12 is wide open as well. So let's go to the top 5 now, and not pretty much a change here in the top 5, other than the number 1 seed. Clemson at number 5, Michigan at number 4, Ohio State at number 3, same kind of top 3 there. And then Georgia and Alabama switch sides. Georgia at number 2 now, and Alabama at number 1. Let's talk about Clemson first. Clemson coming off that big win against NC State at home, so they're 5-0. And like I said, Clemson is a playoff contender, so I think they are pretty much a playoff contender now if you look at what their season has holded. Their offense is a little bit sluggish against conference play, but I think this offense, like I said, will get better. Michigan also at 5-0. Michigan's offense has kind of struggled the last 2 weeks, but they were able to come out with 2 big-time wins against Big Ten opponents with Maryland and Iowa on the road. I mean, Iowa's offense hasn't been all that great, so, I mean, Michigan, they are 5-0. Ohio State, their offense has looked really good. Coming off that big win against the Rutgers, I mean, that game right there didn't even prove to be all that close. I mean, Ohio State's offense, like I said, is the most dangerous offense in the country. Then Georgia at number 2, they're 5-0, but in the last 2 games, Georgia's defense has not looked good. You know, Georgia's defense has not looked pretty good, and, you know, Georgia's offense has looked a little sluggish. They looked sluggish in that Missouri game, which I'm really shocked at how that game played out. You know, I thought that game would probably not be even that close, but I think when Georgia plays a tougher opponent, you know, it really gets to them. You know, that game against Oregon, I guess that was a fluke. You know, Oregon just wasn't ready to play. And then you have Georgia here just, you know, not really been doing good in the last 2 games. You know, I think those big wins in the first 4 weeks were just flukes, you know, and then they get into the month of October, which hasn't been a really big start for them. So, you know, Georgia, though, they're number 2, still sitting there in the top 5. Alabama, though, they're back at number 1. They're 5-0. I think Alabama deserves to be number 1 after that big win against Arkansas. They pulled away in that game. Bryce Young, I hope he's okay. You know, hopefully that injury is not really serious for them. You know, he can get back out on the field this weekend, but, you know, maybe he'll take some break perhaps. But, I mean, he really shined in that game a little bit. And, you know, Alabama pulled away in that that 4th quarter, and that offense kept rolling and rolling. So, I mean, Arkansas had that game close at the end of the 3rd quarter, but Alabama pulled away in the 4th quarter like they always do. So Alabama back at number 1. That is the top 25 after week number 5 and heading into week number 6. It's been a pretty wide open season so far. And my thoughts on this top 25 is there are a lot of new teams, and I can agree with that. TCU and Kansas, I can agree that they could be in the top 25. I don't agree, though, with Georgia being at number 2. I kind of, you know, wanted Ohio State to be at number 2 because they had the better offensive performance against Georgia if this game were to happen between the both of them. So that concludes the top 25 video, and stay tuned here for more on the Lucas Ross Sports channel.